everybody, Steve Falcon Napier. Welcome to Building a Career That Matters. Today we're going to look at the final couple of activities from our 2022 Success Strategy for Human Development Professionals. So we've been having some really great discussions. All of the recordings are currently up on YouTube. All of you on the call right now should know how to get to the YouTube channel. But one of the things that Linda's going to do after we post the recording of today's call is broadcast to everyone who was originally invited how they can actually get to the YouTube channel to listen to the recordings of the debrief and how they can fill out their own profile if they are so inclined. So that's what's going on. Now, I just wanted to go back a couple of slides because now that the population has expanded, there's a couple of very interesting patterns I thought I'd share with you guys. This one about performing a needs assessment to pinpoint the ways you can be of greatest value. Pretty much the relative positions of the average location, the ideal location, those stay pretty consistent. I just thought it was interesting that out of this entire population, nobody rated the challenge as a 9. So we got a whole bunch of people at 8, and then it jumps to 10 and 11. So I'm always fascinated by that gap. It kind of divides people into different camps. So you either find it manageable or it's really feeling like a bit of a stretch. But relative positions, I don't think really changed all that much. I was doing a debrief yesterday with Peter, and so we got talking about this one. So Peter, you're unmuted if you'd like to share.
Yeah, certainly.
Yesterday.
So the needs assessment, I just want to give a shout out to the Walking the Path. And what I found, I come from a sales background in various forms of fashion, from leadership, medical equipment. And the Walking the Path helped my closing ratio go from about 50%, which I thought was good, to about 90%. So the Walking the Path, I found very effective. And then even yesterday, T, I appreciated the nuances and even developing it further. So that's what I use, and it works.
Excellent. Yeah, Peter and I were talking about how once you know the basics of the path, then you can get to the green step, and there's a deeper revision. You guys have heard us talk about the 4 aspects of control. So what do you hope to gain? What do you hope to lose? What do you not want to gain? What do you not want to lose? Well, if you think about that, that really is fleshing out the entire value equation, or just connecting it directly with goal setting. It helps the person to think about the goal from multiple angles. If the only thing we ever focus on is what people hope to gain, and never talk about what they don't want to lose or don't want to gain, we may be missing identifying that deal breaker, that obstacle that can't be overcome. So I think as you are doing thorough goal development, it's important to look at it from each of those 4 different aspects. What do you hope to gain? What do you hope to lose? What do you not want to gain? What do you not want to lose?
You know, what's interesting, T, is that everyone that you take through that process has one of those quadrants that they're better in than the others.
I would agree completely. Yeah. I mean, it seems like people don't have any trouble with the upper 2. So what do I hope to gain? That's the big one. People seem to flesh that one out with no trouble. And some people can tell you what they're trying to get rid of, because sometimes the goal really is to discard an old habit that's no longer serving you well, or get rid of whatever it is you're trying to get rid of. But usually that, David's just indicating, people have one that they favor. I also think there's one that people tend to avoid.
Yeah.
And then you got to figure out, well, is there nothing there? Or is it that they've just never moved their head into that mode to even think about it from that angle?
Yeah, you really have to explain it thoroughly to get people into the space of one of the quadrants.
Yep, you do. So again,
I think most of us are, most behaviors, when we're talking about the conscious experience, a lot of times that's kind of slow. But when it comes to emotional things, it's fast and it's unconscious. So we're processing a lot of unconscious things daily, because we're actually designed for the status quo. So when it comes to novelty or doing something new, that requires work. And we can't always pinpoint why something isn't working.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We just experience that it's not working, but we can't necessarily pinpoint as to why. We have perceptions, but it's typically not the thing.
Yeah, and so until we move somebody into that mind space and help them to understand and explore it, they may never recognize it at a conscious level. And until they recognize it at a conscious level, their ability to do something about it is kind of undermined, just because, you can't put a lot of energy into fixing something you don't even know exists. So I also think there's an element of bias in the phrasing of the question to begin with. We're asking people about goal setting. Well, goal setting tends to imply or inherently contain this idea about expanding, going somewhere, gaining something, whatever it is, and that's not the whole picture. So I think it's very useful for us and very, very useful for the client to spend some time on a deeper dive into the green step of things. So the desired outcome. I mean, it's fine if you just say, what do you want and why do you want it and what difference do you think it's going to make? So if you just want to ask the basic green sorts of questions, that's all fine. But if you really want to do a deep dive, then what do you hope to gain, lose, not lose, and you'll get a much deeper picture. Yeah. And by the way, don't leave it at just the quantitative stuff. So when I say, what do I hope to gain, lose, not gain, not lose, they're going to give me some sort of, I'll say probably a noun of some sort or an outcome of some sort. They're trying to avoid responsibility. They're trying to avoid high costs. They're trying to gain whatever. I think it's also important that we go for the qualitative element as well and say, well, why is that so important to you? What difference would that make for you? Because ultimately, I've never experienced a change in my life that was perfect all the way around. You always have to end up sacrificing certain things to get what you really want, or you might not be able to gain everything that you want. There's compromises that might have to happen. Well, wouldn't it be nice if while you're having this discussion around the desired state, you can also get some sense about the relative value that they are placing on each of those elements of whatever the desired state might contain. That's a lot of words, but thoughts about that? Yeah. All right. Silence is praise. Thank you.
No, I just want to comment on this. This has always been one of my favorite tools of yours, T. And I love using it. And I think the comments that have been made about it are really spot on. It does require a different mindset. It requires moving people into a different space, but it's really rich, when you can do that.
Yep.
So that's been my experience.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. And similarly, when you get into the obstacle discussion, I was sharing with Peter that there's a deeper dive you can do for obstacles. And this goes back to one of the elements we train from pride-based leadership, where we talk about the root causes of human struggle and failure, and they all start with un. So somebody rattle off the 4 uns. Unmute thyself. What are the 4 uns? All right,
So what
Bill, yeah, Peter.
Unaware,
Unaware.
willing, unaware, not willing,
Yeah,
and
unaware. Yeah. Go ahead.
Unable,
Unable. Mhm.
Unwilling,
Unwilling. Yep. And then the last one,
unsuitable.
unsuitable. Those are our 4 uns. If you're struggling to do something, it's either that you are unaware of something that if we made you aware of might suddenly enable you to move forward. So there's some awareness gap that needs to be filled. If you're unable to do something, that means there's some sort of knowledge, skill, experience, or some core physical resource that needs to be addressed. And until we can help you with those things, well, you might struggle as you try to pursue whatever that outcome is. Maybe it's a willingness issue. Plenty of times there are people that are fully able, fully aware, but just don't feel like doing it. And then the last one is about suitability. Maybe what you're going after just isn't right for you. And that, by the way, is one of the things that could be very easily brought to light during those green questions where you're saying, what do you not want to gain and what do you not want to lose? Well, when they start describing the things they don't want to gain or lose, that's where the cost of the change tends to be contained. So the upper 2 quadrants, what do I hope to gain? What do I hope to lose? That's definitely all about the desired outcome. But that, what do I not want to gain? What do I not want to lose? This is the price that must be paid, or that they're trying to avoid paying, as the case may be. If the truth is the price tag is much higher, just doesn't justify whatever the desired outcome happens to be. It might just be an unsuitable goal to be going after. Suitability can also apply, sorry about the jets, but suitability can also apply to the whole individual. But generally speaking, we're just talking about the suitability of the task to that person's skill set, readiness, etc. Am I right? You guys heard all those jets?
Yep.
Yeah, because I tried to put the filter on my microphone. So let me just close my windows real quick. Feel free to chat amongst yourselves back in a jiffy. It really is quite a lovely day here, so I wanted to have the windows open, but oh well. All right, so now why it's important to do a deeper dive into those obstacles is because the way that we would ultimately need to help the client address those obstacles are different depending on, is it an obstacle of awareness? We're going to handle that in a very different way than if it's an obstacle of ability or an obstacle of willingness or suitability. We have to be able to take whatever those obstacles are and address them in whatever the most appropriate, beneficial way happens to be. And if we think that all obstacles fall into the exact same bucket, well, we're going to struggle in order to take care of whatever's broken. So that was one of the things I wanted to add. For those who are using the path of self-discovery, and you've gotten really comfortable using it, maybe it's time to do that deeper dive into goal definition and obstacle identification. Okay, thoughts, comments about that? All righty then. Yeah, okay, or go ahead, feel free.
No, it really does help to, when you do that deeper dive. I did that with a client recently, and his comment was that got him thinking more actively than he had in a long time.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, again, we are people of habit. We're very highly conditioned. And so until someone lets us know that there's a different way of looking at something or a benefit to coming at it from a different angle and then support us in doing that, well, no surprise, we're just going to revert back to what's most normal and comfortable for us. And that may not serve us all that well. Okay, we talked about converting. This is all about sales skills. And although we've expanded the population, it's interesting that most of you are plotting very well when it comes to the skills necessary to convert. Again, if we went really far back in these success skills, you guys, it seems to be the challenges about the marketing side of things, getting yourself in front of enough qualified prospects. But when you find yourself with one, don't seem to be having much of a trouble. That said, there's some skill enhancement we could be doing for a good, looks like 8 or so people there. And there's a little time to raise the bar for a bunch of people down here. Everybody else seems to be doing just fine. But we talked about that last time around, if you want to review that recording. Last time we ended with activity number 10, keeping myself positive and motivated in an ever-changing and increasingly negative world.
Look at the 12s.
I know, look at that. So we got some people who feel like they have, 11s and 12s, that they've really, really very much mastered this task. And I can only hope that would be the case. It's what we do for a living. If we can't keep ourselves positive and motivated, what chance do we have of helping somebody else stay positive and motivated? So I'm glad to see such a strong reporting of skill. It's far beyond what's necessary. There's a lot of people out there who are relatively clueless, but happy as a lark. And so you don't necessarily have to have deep knowledge and skill and about keeping yourself positive. For some people, it's just more of a natural sort of a state. Now, some of you plotting further downgrade about that activity may very well find this to be more of your natural state. In fact, Brian, did you say you're B last time around? Are you B or are you? You're N, right? And so, that's it. We talked last time around, but that Brian's just kind of like, this is part of his makeup. We talked about everyone wakes up with a certain bowl of neurotransmitter soup, and his just happens to have a larger dose of serotonin kind of waiting for him when he wakes up in the morning. And so that's all really, really great. Now, those of you that are
Now
plotting,
put that in a pill, Brian.
you know, it exists. Although serotonin directly does not exist in tablet form, they have figured out how to waken it up. How to wake it up. Yeah. Some
Yeah.
neurotransmitters are actually things you could just buy a bottle of. I mean, we all know about like epinephrine. They can give you an injection of epinephrine and change your reality in milliseconds. But I don't think serotonin, I don't think norepinephrine.
No,
Most of
no,
them,
you
I
can
don't think.
train yourself in them, but I don't think you can bottle that necessarily.
Yeah, I think that's why those of you who have either studied dose or what's the other rearrangement of those letters? Somebody else, Linda was
The
listening.
EDSO,
EDSO, EDSO. These
right,
are all neurotransmitters that can be managed through conscious behaviors. And so if you want more serotonin, there are things that you could just immediately start doing that'll boost your serotonin levels. And Brian, you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but it doesn't really increase the amount of serotonin or the amount of whatever it is. It increases the speed with which how long it lingers
right,
in the synapse.
exactly. That's exactly it. And that's how you train yourself in it. Like it becomes more readily accessible,
Yeah.
and then it'll linger in the system. Because remember, those are like hormone effects.
Yeah.
And so they translate, or I should say operates as both a neurotransmitter and a hormone. And a hormone by design has a lingering effect. So it can impact other areas.
Yep. And so even if those of you who aren't familiar with antidepressants and all that, a lot of them fall in the categories of SSRIs. And SSRI stands for selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. So the reason why people get depressed or whatever is because that reuptake or the synapse or wherever it's attaching to releases it too soon. And if we can just get it to linger where it belongs for a millisecond longer, you can have some pretty dramatic changes. The other category are SNRIs, that's serotonin and norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors. They basically do the same thing, just get things to hang around a little longer where they can do a better job for you before they do get released. Is that right, Brian?
Yes.
Correctly?
Yes. And, for me, I had to like train myself in that because, as a young lad moving around when my father was with the World Health Organization. So I used to have these imaginary friends. And they would make me happy. And I had to do that and to transition to all these new different communities. And I'm losing friends, gaining friends, losing friends. And that was a consistent pattern until I was up to like 16. So I just trained myself in this idea of waking up every day and starting the day afresh, anew, and with some sense of positivity. Doesn't mean it always go that way, but that's how I start my day.
Well, no, but it would also mean that because you have such a history of being able to get into that mindset, getting back into that mindset on demand is much easier for you than someone who has been wallowing in depression for, umpteen years.
Right.
Yep. Boris, did you just unmute, or David, did you just unmute?
I muted, but it was just because I didn't want you to hear me chewing before.
Oh, as long as you share whatever you're eating, that's fine with all of us. So
yeah, I could
okay.
share something too. Judith Glaser wrote a book, Conversational Intelligence, and she found that when she calls it level 3 conversation, where there's trust, collaboration, we feel safe to be vulnerable and authentic. She found that she could, as a clinical psychologist, measure higher levels of serotonin and oxytocin as well by having healthy relationships.
Yeah, right, because oxytocin is that whole bonding kind of neurotransmitter. I know usually when people think of oxytocin, it's all about the mothering instinct, or there's a lot of oxytocin during the birth process and probably during the whole pregnancy and that. But hey, we all have oxytocin, and it's all stimulated when we have that sense of belonging. Yep. Okay. Anywho, so again, I'm not surprised that you guys are reporting such a high level of ability, higher than is actually necessary, but rather have too much than too little. I am quite curious about this range of challenge that you guys are reporting, and I have had some private conversations with some of you, and I won't reveal the content of that, but some of you are finding in the situations of the past couple of years that what I want to say, greater and greater gaps are forming between you and some of the relationships that you've always had and that always worked very, very well. And it's becoming difficult to get things back to a balanced kind of a place. And so that's what I think a lot of these higher ratings for challenge is reflecting. But, lots is happening out there. So again, I'm concerned, and whoever F and L are, if you'd like to have a private reading, I can't wait to talk about this, because obviously we need to help you boost whatever your abilities are, perceived abilities are, to be able to do this for yourself and do it effectively. So I'm glad you're not up to 10, 11, or 12 when it comes to challenge, but this ability gap is what we want to be focusing on there. All right. Now, again, the reason why I'm going through this and reading this the way that it is because the vast majority of you are using the change grid in your client work. So hopefully this is helping you to look at a change grid and see a bit more of the things that the change grid is reflecting to you. So any thoughts about that? Is it useful for you guys to see a bunch of change grids and hear kind of a high level overview?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Good. All right. So, oh, and by the way, someone did ask if I would kind of model for all of you what a one-on-one debrief would sound like. So if I was looking at only one person's change grid and give whatever the guidance is, and I'm more than happy to do that anytime you want and someone agrees to be the client for that kind of a thing. But I would just want to point out to you guys that when it comes to this particular activity set, none of you are sick. You know what I mean? It's like when I look at your grid, everything overall is plotting darn close to where we'd want it to be. I mean, each might have one little floater out there someplace, but by and large, I'm not seeing the scatter pattern that would really, I think, illustrate or demonstrate how a one-on-one reading normally goes. If you come up with your own activity list, and maybe we would do that as the kind of model read, more than happy to do that with you guys. But when it comes to this particular skill set, for a lot of you, there's not a whole lot to say other than good job. Now let's talk about refinements. That said, if you guys are really functioning more like performance coaches, it may very well be that your clients tend to be generally well positioned on all the things that they need to do, but they need their refinements. In which case, rather than doing it as a general grid reading, we would be doing it as a grid reading specifically for adding that last level of polish to whatever it is we're trying to get that client to do. You know what I mean? I know I'm babbling, but if you're only 1 point away from the desired location, this is about subtleties, just little changes, little enhancements to get you the rest of the way to where you want to go. That's kind of a different attack plan than someone being, what is this, 1, 2, 3, 4 points away on the ability scale from where we might like them to end up being. Okay, anyway, I'm open to that. Anyone ever want to suggest that, just reach out. If you want to be the guinea pig, reach out. We'll come up with a good activity list for that. All right. Activity number 11 becomes a bit more problematic for the population. So this is about managing personal time and energy effectively. Now, in all fairness, if I was doing this as a real formal change grid, that should be 2 activities. You guys understand that, yes? Or do I need to? Yeah, it should be 2 activities because it really is 2 different things. But the spirit of this activity, when you're doing more of a high level screening kind of a profile, is how are you when it comes to self-managing? And this is what it's really all about. I mean, some of you might be really great time managers, but you don't have the energy to really do the work. And some of you might be really great energy managers and have no concept at all about how to best manage your time. So, they're different things. That said, when it comes to generals, this is what the pattern looks like. Oh, by the way, one thing I do want to say is when you filled this out, I would be very surprised if you went, well, let me rate myself for my time management. Okay, that's a whatever. And then let me separately rate myself for the energy level, and that's a whatever. And I'll just average those 2 out, and that's what I'll put down as an answer. I doubt that very much. I believe that what happens when you give people multiple outcomes or multiple verbs is there's a process, if you remember from your basic training, a process called tension override that occurs. So can I stump the stars and ask anyone to tell me what tension override means? Anybody?
Well,
Yes.
it sounds like something is more important than something else.
Yeah, and it may be very much at a subconscious level. So I don't know, for example, if individual D, whoever that might be, was answering this based on an average of the two, or if for whatever reasons right now they're just feeling their personal time management is taking a huge hit, or maybe they're having some real difficulties with managing energy and it's representing that. So until I do a bit of a debrief, I don't know which of these possibilities carried the highest level of tension. But tension override is just giving us an insight that says sometimes when people are answering a question, they interpret it the way that their tension is commanding them to interpret it. Sometimes, while they might be looking at a particular activity, wrote the way that we wrote it out, their mind might say, well, that's all fine and dandy, but I'm going to superimpose a different activity on top of it because this one I'm reading just triggered this in me, and now I'm answering based on this instead of based on what was asked. Can you guys all relate to what I've just rattled off there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's tension override. Now, when you're reading an individual's change grid, it doesn't matter because when you do the debrief, you're going to ask plenty of questions. Again, it's a tool of conversation, so you'll find out if an override occurred or if they favored one of these instead of the other one. You'll find that all out. In a group profile, though, this is why it becomes increasingly important for you to be very, very clear with what the activity wording is, and never forget that right next to the activity block for creating a change grid is a description block. Don't hesitate to use that description block to give full detail about what it is you're asking that group to do. When it comes to doing individual profiles, it would not be an exaggeration for me to say to you that I never have and never will use the description blocks for an individual profile, because in all likelihood, I didn't create the activity list. I co-created it with the client. So they already know what they meant by those activities. I don't need to explain them further. But I've always believed that group profiles pretty much require that description block has been pulled into play if you really want to look at the results and say, no, I mean, I explained it in vivid detail exactly what I meant. So, and I think I did a pretty good job for even this screening profile on using the description blocks.
Tim, can you talk about the your perspective of those two as separate activities?
Yeah, well, when I think about managing my personal time, this to me is more of an analytical driver activity, because this is about me figuring out, well, what's the best way for me to use my time? What can I put back to back? What do I need to do? Because I just from my own personal experience, if I have a writing project I need to get done, and I believe the writing project is going to take 4 hours, I can't do that an hour here and an hour there. I need to have 4 hours as a solid block. And during that solid block, I need to ensure that nobody bothers me. Because if I get yanked out of that creative writing mode, it's very difficult for me to get back into it. So I think I'm a decent writer, but I'm a decent writer when I can use my natural kind of system for getting into that writing mode. It's not an easy thing for me to get into. So once I get into it, I need to be left there. So when it comes to time management, I have to factor things like that into it. Or maybe you need to factor in when you're going to eat or when you're going to exercise, because if you're not careful, you can end up filling your time in such a way that the things you need to do for self-care don't even appear. And by the end of the day, you run out of energy. And so that becomes a real problem. All right, so to me, that's very different than in managing energy. So for example, you guys know I'm into weightlifting, and because Linda and I are on this voluntary quarantine right now so that we can ensure that she tests negative for her the pre-cruise test she has to do, we thought, all right, for 10 days, we're just gonna lock ourselves in the house, not run errands, not go to the gym, all that kind of stuff. Well, I found out that starting at about our gyms here at Sun City West close at 9 o'clock at night. Well, apparently by 7:30, quarter to 8, it's a ghost town and there's nobody there. And so I thought, well, we could go at 8 o'clock at night, except for one thing. I have no energy for working out at 8 o'clock at night. And so while the opportunity may be there, the energy isn't. And so to me, that's the real difference. So some people have their best workouts first thing in the morning. For me, I have my best workouts midday, but definitely not at night. There's just nothing left by that time. All right. Anyone else got thoughts about?
Yeah, T, I got a comment on this. So for me, I have gone away completely from any sort of a time management system. I find that it wreaks havoc on my productivity.
Oh,
And so instead, what I call it is focus management.
oh, I like that.
So what I've done is for myself created a system, what I call my productivity planner. And it's really just two components. One is what I do in the morning. It's my morning routine to get myself mentally set for the day and what I need to accomplish and what I'm going to focus on. And then there's a second component, which is what I call the action tracker, which is my during the day activity that defines what I need to do at the end of the day as a recap to make sure that I was productive. And so in my morning routine, I ask myself what I call my central morning question, which is, what decisions can I make and what actions can I take to make this the most productive day ever? And the follow-up to that question is I identify the three most important things for the day that are both urgent and important that need to get done. And then three things which I think are important, but not necessarily urgent.
Yes.
And that becomes my to-do list for the day. I don't look at any to-do lists or anything else beside that. And then as I go through the day, on the back end, I am on my action tracker, keeping track of my interactions, my meetings, the things that I've done, and what I need to do as follow-up activity at the end of the day. And then when I get to the end of the day, I ask myself a similar question: is what decisions did I make and what actions did I take today to make the most impact on my goals? So that's how I kind of see this. I feel that this system for me is significantly better than any kind of a time tracking, scheduling, to-do list type of an approach.
That's excellent. I mean, many of us, because our businesses are appointment driven, we kind of have no choice but to have a calendar. And, it kind of dictates things, but I like this idea that it's more about your focus. So the degree to which we have the flexibility to do what requires the focus, I think that's really great. In fact, your two labels there, it's like we did years ago a new layer of the change grid, or on the circle of brilliance, we did a merging of brilliance, where we said, well, where are tasks that are unimportant? What's the other one? Unimportant and
urgent. So it's urgency and importance.
Yeah, because if it's really urgent and it's important, that's going to plot somewhere very different on the change grid. So we can actually plot things on the change grid instead of activities or people. We can plot all kinds of things on here. So we can tell you where activities that are unimportant and not urgent are likely going to land on the change grid. Anyone want to predict where those are going to be? So,
down in apathy somewhere.
Yeah, they're down in apathy. Okay. All right. So, jumping back on what this grid is saying, and again, any of you who want to try your hand at doing the high-level interpretation, don't let me stop you. So, anyone notice anything jump out at you? Is any of this kind of really striking you? To me, I've got three floaters. D to me
A
is
way
floating.
out there.
A, look at A, that they're really, really, really good at it, and it's an impossible task. Don't you want to hear that backstory? You know, that's why one of the things I love about using the change grid as a tool for conversation is that I go right there. It's like, oh, there's got to be a story there for someone to say what. And I'm glad they got the ability. I mean, yay, that's great. I don't have any question mark around that. My question mark is what makes it so impossible? Is it that you're flooded with things that need to be done and it's simply you don't have the capacity to handle everything that's coming your way, even though you know you kind of are a superhero and ultimately make it happen? I mean, something's happening there that I'd love to know about. I don't know who A is, but if you know you're A and feel comfortable disclosing, feel free. But V is quite far downgrade. Now that means that they could very well be a subject matter expert on this particular skill. But at the same time, I'm looking at a downgrade plotting and going like, well, the further downgrade you go, the more things become very routine, predictable, habitual. And, you know, is it time to raise the bar? Can we do something to get you back into being fully engaged when it comes to your time and territory? So I think there's some conversations I'd like to have. But from a developmental perspective, notice that we have several people who rated their ability 4, 5, 6. Nobody rated their ability a 7. And then we have 8, 9, 10, 11, and a 12. So by and large, the population views itself as being very well capable of doing the particular task. But we have some people right here who are saying, I don't know what I need to know. Remember we said the uns, maybe they're unaware of something, unable to do something. I don't think this would be a willingness issue. It might be a suitability issue because they might be inviting things into their reality that they simply don't want to do, but they've committed themselves over obligated themselves, and now you know they're stuck and don't know how they can go about doing it. So there's definitely some developmental work that needs to be done in a bigger way here. Because look at the gap. I want you to be reporting a 10, and I've got people at 4, 5, 6. This is a big gap in perceived ability. So there's training work to be done around this population. Everybody else, it's just little refinements here and there. I'd be curious to know why the challenge is up there at 10 and 11. Is it more about time? Is it more about energy? But that's what I see here. Anyone else want to throw anything in? What do you see? What do you think?
I'm thinking a lot of this most likely is a lot of unawareness, because you talk about this idea of energy in and of itself. That's not a set it and forget it kind of thing. That's an ongoing process, right?
Yep,
And so
yep.
capacity in the moment is uniquely different than the next moment. And
Right.
so that's something that, you know, in taking this assessment, I'm thinking about energy, which is why I was asking about your perception of them two as separate.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking of a lot of research, like in Dr. Jim Lear's book, The Power of Full Engagement, Why Managing Your Energy, Not Time, is what he says is the key to success in life and fulfillment. And that's what Boris was just describing. Because in their mind, if you manage the energy relative to time, is what some of the research is showing, you're at least positioning yourself in terms of capacity to handle the stimulus coming at you. That's what they, you know, and that's, of course, it's going to be uniquely different for everyone, but that's their thesis.
And that makes total sense because, I mean, bottom line, energy, a human's energy is about whatever is going on with their neurochemistry and whatever's going on with their biochemistry, if you think about
Right,
it.
right.
So
That's the whole essence to me of self-management, is really about managing your nervous system.
yeah. Oh, Chris has got a great observation. I don't know if you guys can all see that. He sent it over to hosts and panelists, but he said only 3 people view this as small in size. That's the green circles. Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit, because that, by the way, now supports even more so my thought that V is a subject matter expert around this particular topic, because they consider it to be a small task, high level of ability, moderately low level of challenge, not very big, but very important. So that to me feels like I'm likely to encounter a subject matter expert around that. Nevertheless, I'd still want to explore a discussion around raising the bar. If you're that good at it, can we raise the bar? raise the bar. Like even if I'm talking to Boris, and I don't know which one of these is Boris, but if I said, Boris, if that method works really well for you, is that a module you can train to other people? Is that some tool that you formalized? You know, I mean, do something with it.
Actually, I have, and I've used it with sales individuals. I've used it with a number of different individuals. Specifically, obviously, my CEO targets are the people that I've trained in this. And I've created a system. I use something called Rocketbook that allows you to send the copies of the work and digitize it and store it on your phone and other places. So there's a lot more to what I'm describing.
Yeah.
But to clarify one thing, the meetings and appointments that people have, structured activity is built into it in my case.
Yeah.
So
I
I've
imagine
got a
so,
full
because that's got
calendar electronically.
Yeah, because that's inescapable. You know,
Yeah.
we're all in business. There's going to be appointments, but it's
That's right.
what do you do with your time and energy between those appointments? I think
Well,
that's where what you're talking about sounds really interesting when it comes.
I think what it actually helps me do, to Brian's point, is I look at my calendar in conjunction with this. I call it a productivity planner because it's not a calendar. When I look at the calendar and I see the structured activity that I've already blocked out, it informs me as to what is most important and where I have to make time. So I then go into my future days and block out, if I know I've got a project that's really important and urgent, and I've got 3 or 4 appointments tomorrow, I have no time. I have to block it out to work on that project.
That's right.
So
Make
it
an
really
appointment
gets
to
me
do that.
focused on the time aspect.
Yep. So a couple of you are saying that you're also familiar with Rocketbook. So Chris, feel free to unmute if you'd like. And Brian, are you using
Yes,
Rocketbook?
I use it to do exactly what Boris is describing, because what happens when they talk about this idea of managing energy, like Dr. Jim Lear in his book, as I mentioned, he's a sports psychologist. So they study high performing people. And so what most people are unaware of is how you transition from one activity to the next matters just as much as the activity itself.
Oh, interesting.
So this idea of understanding, how you fill that gap in terms of that transition, because most people, if they have an extra 10 or 15 minutes, they're going to fill it with something and then try to go on to the next thing. But that's the equivalent of multitasking, is equivalent of channel surfing, right? And so there's this real phenomenon called attention residue. So you moved on to the next activity, but you're still carrying some mental, emotional bandwidth and weight from the last activity.
Right.
And so now you're minimizing your performance, you're minimizing capacity. And again, these things can work against you. So transitioning, how you transition matters just as much as the activity itself. And that's what understanding a structured approach to this does for you.
Yeah, I find that the energy required to do task switching between things is very significant. And so what I'll do, like, for example, tasks that I hate to do, like pay bills and accounting and things like that, I bundle them up together, and I'll only do them at my off-peak time when I'm, have that ability to not worry about activities that are important to me interfering.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe it's a Saturday morning activity or something that doesn't get in the way of anything else.
Yep. Very good. Very good.
In the book, because I got into using the Rocketbooks. I've been reading this book about essentialism, and one of the core thoughts around it is if you don't prioritize your life, someone else will, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what it helped me do is to remove, Rocketbook helped me to organize and remove a lot of the waste that I've been having around me and being more efficient with my notes. So I like what was just said about how you could just scan it and it can automatically, you can set it to automatically go to where it needs to be. So it helps me streamline managing my personal time and energy, because I don't have to deal with it because it's already taken care of. It helps me automate my life.
Well,
maybe I should reach out to the people at Rocketbook and see if they want to sponsor a video.
Well, let me suggest something. Since there's a couple people using it, I am more than happy to share with you guys the templates that I created in Rocketbook.
Nice.
And all you have to do is just photocopy it like I do and use it every day if you like it. If not, you can adjust it for what you want.
Put in the email and chat right now, Boris.
Yeah. There you go.
Give me your emails and I'll send it to you.
So that also might be a really good subject for us on the Circle of Brilliance moving forward, because obviously we're finishing this up today. I want a new subject starting on Tuesday. And I thought, well, this one would show that there is some beneficial work to be done around managing personal time and energy. By the way, we've been talking a bit about time. Going back to energy, I said it's biochemical and neurochemical. We talked a little bit earlier in the series about the importance of sleep and good, sleep hygiene and all that. But biochemically, you're also talking about blood sugar being managed well. So how's diet affecting it? How's exercise affecting it? And then I would think that those kind of conscious behaviors, or those kind of more input sorts of things, are going to then have an impact on our neurochemistry. So we'll have more of those things to keep our energy high, so our batteries don't run out by the end of the day. Okay, so let's take a look at activity number 12.
Hey, T, before you leave that real
Sure.
quickly,
Yep.
when I worked as a job analyst and we looked at classifying jobs, right? And one of the things that was important to that, I think, is relative to this conversation, where when we would get a list of tasks for a given job, one of the important questions we asked folks was to prioritize that list. And so when we were talking about the importance, how folks view the importance of task, I think that that's very helpful from a coaching standpoint, and it may give explanation as to why people plot certain places when you look at the task list in totality. I don't know if that makes sense, but
It absolutely does.
yeah. So I thought of that as we were having the conversation, and Chris mentioned where folks were plotting around importance, and it caused me to consider that.
Excellent. All right, let's see. Let me just do one thing real quick, and then I'm curious to move on to the last one, which is about planning a good exit strategy. All right, where did this all go? Just one second, don't mind me. I'm creating something new and astounding for everyone who's involved. Ah, there it is. I'm not good at multitasking. Oh, don't give yourself that message, T. Here we go. Great, sent. Boris, I saved you the trouble of writing everyone's addresses down.
Okay, that would be great, because I was just trying to save the chat.
No, I just emailed it over to you.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, all right. So the last activity, and this was the other one I thought could be a very good topic for the Circle of Brilliance going forward, is that exit strategy. So developing an exit strategy to maximize what I want most when I choose to retire. So there is no strict definition around what I mean by maximize, or what I want most, or what I mean by retire. So all of you are going to interpret that your own way.
Well, that's a shotgun blast, T.
I know a giant explosion on the one hand has occurred on the change grid, but notice the gap. Nobody gave himself a 5 for ability. So I've got a little camp over here at the 3s and 4s. And then if I look at the challenge scale, nobody rated the challenge as a 5. So I've got this downgrid kind of block, but most of you are out here, this driver quadrant around it. So
T, very interesting for me is I plotted exactly the same place as whoever R is on the chart, all the way down. And I think because I interpreted this question as I don't ever plan to retire.
Right. But do you plan on operating the exact way you're operating today for the rest of your life?
I have a feeling that would be the case.
Oh, well, then good for you. So yay. All right. And there's your strategy. And so that's certainly one thing that we could talk about. Sometimes your best strategy is to simply move forward without any thought about time limits or constraints or anything like that. Now, that's all fine and dandy, and I'm just going to talk to Boris about this because he's the one who stepped forward to share on all this. But Boris, sooner or later, you're not going to be gracing our planet with your presence. Mm-hmm. And on that day, I'm wondering how much of what you've put together should endure to benefit future generations.
Well, hopefully a lot, if my plans come to fruition. I spent the first 50 years of my life worrying about kind of the traditional route of doing a job and building a career and all that. And now I'm wanting to spend the next part of my life is leaving that legacy and
There you go.
behind
so
the
to me,
impact that I want.
right, because now you've just given me an exit strategy to maximize what you want most. So you and I are similar in this regard, that I'm at a point in my life where I kind of go, I've created a lot of what, I mean, I hope you guys agree with me. I've created a lot of really interesting, useful intellectual property. If I die and it's gone, well, I think that's a loss. And so I should be putting it into some sort of format that others can benefit from, so that things like the change grid and master stream and tension management can have a life of its own long after I'm gone. And so for you, it's the only thing that changed is that retire, we need to swap out to drop dead. So what's your exit strategy to maximize what you want most before you drop dead? So I think
I kind of made a decision that whatever I was going to do professionally for the rest of my life was going to be about making that impact in the world.
Yeah. And so that might mean
that became my business.
Right. So that might include writing a book, developing a certification plan, finding a protege who could become a successor. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do because of what you've just said is what you want most. So I think that there's a lot of different ways to interpret this, and that may very well explain a great deal of what this scatter pattern looks like on the change grid. But the thing that strikes me the most, forget these little rivers of white for just a second, but look at how many people are rating their ability as lower than the 10 that we're looking for. Because am I right? This is developing a strategy. It's inherently an analytical driver activity. And so it belongs here. But I have only a handful, relatively speaking, a handful of people who view their ability as being high enough to actually do whatever this activity means to them. So that's what I'm saying, like, this could be a really interesting conversation for the circle to embark upon, so we can kind of map out for everyone what's the range of possibilities when it comes to exit strategies, or what are these things that people might want to do when they choose. So what is this mission that this implies exists, and what do they really mean by retire anyway? So and so I think there's a lot to go there, but what I'm concerned about the most is that this is the one activity, the only activity out of the 12 where it is very clear that there is a big gap in knowledge, skill, experience, resources. Maybe it's an awareness kind of an issue. Maybe, just maybe, they've never thought about this, which might explain the higher levels of perceived challenge that we're looking at. So, pardon me. So do you guys see something similar to what I've just kind of pointed out there?
Yes, I think I'm still strategizing on that from the perspective of this idea of what Carl Jung would call the afternoon of your life. So like each decade, I give myself a theme. And so it's now working out that theme now that I'm in my 50s. What do I want to spend that so-called afternoon of life doing? And I know I want it to have an impact. I just don't know what it looks like just yet, because there are
right.
Opportunities.
And look where you're at, the exact center of the change grid.
Exactly.
So you're just kind of open. You're there observing whatever it is. And so for people that are, I mean, pretty much if I scan down the list, all right. So what I'm about to say may not apply to all of you, but I think it does. There might be a lot of people watching these videos that we would describe as being in the spring or summer of their business's life, where most of us on the call are in the autumn of our business, and some of us might even be tipping our toe into the winter. So this is where you have to kind of figure out, if you are in the spring or summer of your business or of your new enterprise, as the case may be, you don't have to figure this out. You got plenty of time. But if you are in the autumn, And certainly, if you are starting to step ever so carefully and cautiously into the winter, this is where you need to be putting some energy right now. Because I don't want to wait until later to decide what later is going to look like.
Right.
Because we might want to build things according to whatever that outcome is. You know, we talk about lifestyle, and I forget who wrote the book about lifestyle versus work style, and how you really want to make sure that your work style is a good match for your lifestyle. So whatever this lifestyle you want while you're doing whatever this thing is you're calling retirement is concerned, you got to make sure your work style is able to match that. So yeah. All right, thoughts around that? Other thoughts?
I think it'd be a good conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because there's so many different possibilities that are on here.
That's the most interesting out of all 12 slides.
Yep, I think so too. So maybe we'll do this one next, and then I don't mind going back to number 11. We can talk about time and energy efficient. Oh, by the way, one other thing I want to say about energy. This resonates with what we've been talking about for negativity, positivity, neutrality, because that's very much an expression of the energy you have around something. So I think we got some things we've kind of done that we just need to like bring together in the names of managing those kinds
Since
of
we only have a few minutes,
Yeah.
let me bring up something relationship to this slide 12.
Okay.
And one of the reasons why I detest the word retire is because I've had so many clients and just associates I've met that were significantly older than me, obviously, and in their winter years, you could see the cognitive decline that they were experiencing, even though they were highly successful during their career. But for whatever reason, they would lose their short-term memory. They were just not active mentally anymore in anything that's engaging to them. And so to me, that is just such a terrible waste. You know what I mean?
I
And
agree. I agree.
totally reversible from Brian can talk to this better than I can. But I believe, all of that comes from the hippocampus kind of deteriorating over time and the need to have it stimulated. And there's, I'm sure, dietary things and chemical things that can be done, but there's also, keeping yourself active.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, and there's a
Well-
lot of research on that. Lots of research. And you have to think about, there's predictive medical technology out that says it's not going to be uncommon to find a centenarian any longer. But you talk to young people about strategizing a 50-year work life, that's unthinkable.
Yeah. Their head's not there yet. Yep.
I agree there needs to be conversation about retire. I don't like using that word. I think it's always about transition.
Yep.
So, so I think that should be part of the conversation when we do that. I think that will be.
I agree. Well, in fact, if you guys think back when we were talking about launching the Oracle of the Self and before COVID happened, even in those early slides, I say that we talk about, instead of retiring, we talked about rewiring. And I didn't coin that. I forget who says, well, it's not retirement. It's just rewiring things. You're kind of doing different things in a different way, but you're still doing. And that's the important part of it. So I think it'd be great to even pull out some of those studies have been done. In fact, one of them was talking about that if you allow yourself to use the word retired as a self-descriptor, you are triggering a whole bunch of processes inside of your body and brain that are going to fulfill whatever that vision is of what retired means to you. So if it means old and feeble, guess what you become? Yep. Okay, so with that, we're done with our little debrief for this profile. On Tuesday, we'll begin a discussion about exit strategies and how we go about preparing for the winter of whatever our business plan might be. And yeah, go from there. So with that, any final questions, thoughts anyone wants to share?
That's super good.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
You're welcome.
Always, thank you. Yes.
All right, great. Okay, I hope you'll all join us on the call on Tuesday. So Linda will send out a broadcast, but that's the plan. So thanks, everybody. Bye for now.
Thanks, Steve.